This one is by U/Blair Daniels, and it is titled, I worked as a night guard at the grocery store. They left a strange set of rules. I saw the job listing 2 weeks ago. Wanted, night guard, at West Market in Redacted. PA, 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. shift, $21 an hour. The whole thing struck me as odd, right off the bat. What kind of grocery store needed a security guard while it was closed? Was the crime really that bad? But I needed the money, badly, and 2 days later, after a phone interview with a man named Clive, I showed up for my first shift. As soon as I pulled up, I sort of understood why they needed a night guard. The grocery store sat at the edge of a rundown strip mall. Large signs reading "Space for Rent" hung in the store windows, but judging by the dusty glass and flickering street lamps, no one had taken them up on their offer in years. I parked near the front door, and as I approached the building, I saw a woman hurrying away from the store. "You must be Aaron," she said breathlessly. "The night guard." "That's me. Clive left you some instructions. I put them on the conveyor belt at the register." She gave me a polite nod and then stepped around me, heading for the only other car in the parking lot. "Oh, thanks. Be friendly," my inner voice scolded. "She's your new co-worker." I turned around. "Hey, what's your name?" But she was already diving into the car. The door slammed. The car reeled out of the parking space. And then she was gone. So much for a new friend. I turned back toward the store. The parking lot was completely empty now, and the nearest streetlight was flickering with an odd, erratic rhythm. A cold wind swept in, whipping a crumpled paper bag across the parking lot. Well, here goes nothing. I stepped up to the store. The glass doors squeaked as they parted for me, and then I stepped inside. Despite its outward appearance, the store was actually pretty nice inside. Bright fluorescent lights shone from overhead. Jazzy music played from hidden speakers. I headed over to register 1, where a folded piece of paper was waiting for me. "Dear Aaron, welcome to the West family. We sincerely hope you enjoy your first shift. To help you, we've compiled a list of rules that should make your shift as easy as our fresh-baked apple pie. As a night guard, you are expected to patrol the store every half hour, making sure nothing is amiss. You may spend the rest of your time in the break room at the back of the store, monitoring the security cameras outside. Monitoring the security camera feeds. Do not go down aisle 7. Do not look down aisle 7. If you hear a knocking sound coming from within the freezers in the frozen food aisle, ignore it. If you see a shopping cart that hasn't been put away, please return it to the shopping carts at the front of the store immediately. Do not be alarmed if you find a pool of blood in the meat aisle. Sometimes our meat packages leak. Simply head to the storage closet, get them up in a bucket, and clean it up. However, do not step in the puddle or touch it in any way. If you see a woman in the store, immediately go to the break room and stay there until she leaves. Do not call the police or report a break-in. Do not make eye contact with her. The music we play throughout the store is a pre-recorded disc of instrumental circumstances, end your shift early. Thank you so much, and again, I hope you enjoy your shift. Clive. I stared at the rolls, rereading them slowly. They were so weird. A woman in the store. Avoid aisle 7. I'd never been given instructions like this, even when I worked as a bouncer at a nightclub in the back part of town. Maybe it was a test. They wanted to see how well I could follow instructions, no matter how absurd they were. I looked up at the security camera, staring down at me from the corner. Okay. Challenge accepted. I glanced at my phone. 12:06. Might as well get my first patrol out of the way now, before getting settled in. It was odd, walking through the store when it was so empty and quiet. All the breads and the muffins had been stored away somewhere, while opaque plastic had been pulled down over the vegetable display to keep the cold in. When I got to the end, I made a right into the meat section. Sheets of plastic had been pulled over the meat coolers too. I saw flashes of red through the gaps of massive ribeye and sirloin steaks. Big slabs of meat with the bones still intact. I averted my eyes. While I wasn't a vegetarian, I never really liked the sight of raw meat. I turned instead to the aisles. Aisle 3, pasta and sauces, all lined up on the shelves, glinting in the fluorescent light. Aisle 4, cookies and snacks. Aisle 5, aisle 6. Oh right, I wasn't supposed to look at aisle 7. I forced myself to look down at the floor. Yeah, it was stupid, but they told me not to look. In the off chance they were going to check the CCTV footage later to grade my performance, I was going to follow every rule. I continued further into the store. A few minutes later, I found the break room, a nondescript brown door with a little square window cut into it. I took note of its location for later. As soon as I was done with this patrol, I was going to break out my laptop and finish watching Friday the 13th. And then I was at the west end of the store, the frozen. section. I turned down the aisle, heading back towards the front. That's when I saw it. A shopping cart parked askew in the middle of the aisle. I huffed. Of all the rules, this one was the one that annoyed me the most. I was hired to be a security guard, not a clean-up crew. Wasn't it the employee's job to put all the carts away at closing time? Sighing, I began pushing it towards the front of the store. The wheels rolled smoothly underneath me. The jazz music played softly in my ears. I turned the corner and walked past the cash registers, heading towards the front door. That's when I heard it. A soft sound, barely audible over the jazz music. I stopped, straining my ears to listen. Several seconds of silence went by, and then I heard it again. It sounded like someone crying. Who's there? The hairs on my neck stood on end. There's no one in here. The door's been locked the whole time. Unless a customer had accidentally stayed past closing time. Maybe that employee the woman had run into in the parking lot didn't notice them and locked up before they could get out. Who's there? I called out, a wailing sob in response. My heart plummeted. It sounded like a woman, or possibly even a child. I'm coming, I called, breaking into a run. Where are you? They didn't reply, they just kept sobbing. I frantically continued in the direction of the sound, calling out to them, telling them everything would be okay. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. 12:30. end-cap display of mayonnaise and carefully positioned myself so I was hidden. "I'm going to help you," I called out. "Can you tell me what happened?" They finally spoke, but they didn't answer my question. "Help me," the voice cried, through more sobs. "Please." I wanted to step into the aisle. My foot was already halfway off the floor, ready to run in there and comfort them. But something stopped me. A gut instinct, a little alarm bell going off in my head, because out of all the aisles, what were the chances this person would be in aisle 7? And besides, they were safe. They were in an empty store with me. It's not like they were in a dark alleyway in the middle of the night. "Come out of the aisle," I called, my voice shaking a little. "Then I'll be able to help you." "Please," the voice replied. "Help me." This is stupid. Clearly some person got stuck in here after closing time and they're scared. Just go into the aisle and help them get home. But there was another part of my brain, the instinctual lizard brain part, and it was screaming at me not to move a muscle. "Do you need me to call someone?" I tried. "Your parents or family? The police?" "Help me," the voice pleaded again. The "help me," it sounded the same each time they said it, a little stutter at the beginning, an emphasis on me. It almost sounded like a recording or some AI generated thing, looping over and over. It didn't sound natural. "Come out of the aisle," I shouted. "Come out and I'll help you." The sobs got louder, faster, hysterical. "Help me," the voice pleaded again, in a desperate tone that made my stomach twist. I stood there, pressed against the mayonnaise display. Listening to them sob was making my stomach flip-flop, even if it did sound slightly unnatural. I could call the police, I thought. They'd know what to do. Except I'd left my cell phone with my backpack at cash register 1, and getting it would mean crossing aisle 7. The rules didn't say anything about walking past aisle 7, they just said I shouldn't go down it or look down it, and I couldn't just stand here and do nothing. What if it really was someone who needed help, a child who'd sprained their ankle and couldn't get up? "Don't worry, I'm getting my phone, I'm calling the police," I called out. Then I took a deep breath and stepped across the threshold of aisle 7 towards cash register 1. As soon as I took a step, the crying stopped, just like that. Violent sobbing, and then, in an instant, nothing, like a switch had flipped. Then the footsteps stopped. Loud, slapping footsteps of someone running down the aisle, way too large to be a child, coming straight at me. My heart dropped. It's a trap. They're coming for me, and I'm probably going to die here. But as soon as I made it across the aisle, the sound stopped. All I heard were the soft jazz tunes playing through the speakers overhead. I hightailed it to the break room, completely forgetting about the guard I was supposed to read there. The break room was small and cramped. The little square window in the door had been blacked out with construction paper from inside. The only source of light came from the computer screen on the desk, displaying security camera feeds. I scrolled through the feeds. I quickly noticed that none of them offered coverage of aisle 7. It seemed like the cameras were intentionally placed to avoid that aisle. After searching the grainy black and white video for anything amiss, I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. When I finally opened them again, it was almost 12:30. Time for my next patrol. I didn't want to go. I felt safe here, locked up in this little room, but I also knew I wouldn't be safe if I didn't listen to the rules. I shuddered, imagining what would have happened to me if I'd gone down aisle 7. If I'd gone down aisle 7, if I hadn't listened. The store was completely silent. No hysterical sobbing or pounding I started patrol near the back, walking up aisle 17. Cans of food glinted on the shelves as I passed. But when I glanced at them, I didn't see any labels I recognized. No chef ravioli or giant green men, just generically labeled cans of meat stew. In fact, all the aisles had was meat stew, the same cans over and over and over. I reached the end and turned right towards the front of the store, and that's when I realized I had already broken one of the rules. The cart, I hadn't returned it. It wasn't where I had left it. Instead of haphazardly parked near aisle 7, it sat next to one of the cash registers, like some ghost man was checking out his groceries. I paused for a second, hands hovering above the handle. Then I grabbed it and headed towards the door. Outside, the parking lot was pitch black. Not a single street lamp. The shopping carts are only a few feet from the door, I told myself. Just go in and out. It'll take 2 seconds. I did it as quickly as possible. I ran into the darkness, slammed the shopping cart into the row, and dashed back inside. Then I shut the doors and clicked the lock. Okay, that wasn't too bad, I said to myself, letting out a sigh of relief. For a second, I reveled in the peace of the store, the silence, the safety of being locked inside with no one else with me. But then I stopped. The silence. Oh no. The jazz music wasn't playing. How long had it been off? I'd been so preoccupied with returning the card I wasn't even paying attention. I broke into a sprint towards the back of the store, cookies and snacks flying past me, cookies and snacks flashing by me. Then I swerved right and sprinted into the break room. I pulled out the list of rules and read them over again. Do not, under any circumstances, end your shift early. Why did he write that? Was it just because he didn't want anyone flaking out on him? Or if I left early, would some horrible fate befall me? Because I really wanted to leave. I opened my backpack, pulled out the soda I'd brought, and popped it open. Took a sip, scrolled through the security feed. 5 more hours. The next 4 patrols went fairly well. The rules didn't say how long they had to be, so every 30 minutes I sprinted a lap around the store as fast as I could. The whole thing only took about a minute. Then for the other 29 I locked myself in the break room. On the second patrol I heard knocking as I ran down the freezer aisle. It started as light tapping across the glass, then crescendoed into loud thumps, like someone was slamming their palms against the glass doors. As per the rules, I ignored it. I just kept running until I made it back to the break room. On the last patrol, the music had cut out again, so I quickly detoured and got to the break room as quickly as I could, the silence ringing in my ears. And now, here I was in the break room with 3 hours left. I stared at my phone's clock, ticking slowly towards 3 a.m. I stood up, shaking out my nervous energy, preparing myself to sprint. I'd been a runner back in high school, but in the past 10 years I'd gotten way out of shape. The last patrol had left me panting and breathless, legs aching. My hand closed around the doorknob. My heart hammered in my chest. 3, 2, 1, go. I wrenched the door open and shot out into the store. But I didn't get very far, because there was an enormous pool of blood on the floor. I froze, all the air sucked out of my lungs. I stared at the blood, shining in the fluorescent lights. The rules said to clean it up, but that would take at least 10 minutes. I wasn't safe out here. I swallowed. Then I hurried She faced away from me, standing still, her thin white arms hanging limply at her sides. In her hand was a basket filled with cuts of raw meat. The rule echoed in my head. If you see a woman in the store, immediately go to the break room. Do not make eye contact with her. I slowly backed up as quietly as I possibly could. Then I started down the next aisle toward the break room. Click, click, click. I heard her footsteps echo against the tile. I hurried my pace towards the break room, but then I stopped. Her footsteps weren't coming from behind me, they were coming from in front of me. I averted my eyes to the floor just as I saw two black high-heeled shoes step into the aisle. I stared at the floor. Do not make eye contact with her. Do not make eye contact with her. The words repeated over and over in my head, but I had to get to the break room and she was standing in my way. All I could see were her shiny high-heeled shoes and the little drops of blood that leaked out of the meat packages in her basket, staining the floor. I backed up. There was only one way I could go. I kept my eyes on the floor, careful to not look up, but she was following me. Click, click. For every step I took, I saw a shiny black heel come into view, attached to a thin white cord extend. Keeping time with me, I quickened my pace. So did she. Click, click, click. I wheeled around and broke into a sprint. Click, 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 click. I ran down the aisle at random and sprinted towards the break room, but then halfway down the aisle I stopped. A shopping cart was parked across the middle of the aisle, blocking my way. Not just one cart, several of them, stacked up in a teetering tower that was nearly as tall as the aisles themselves. I was trapped. I backed away, my heart pounding. Click. Slow, methodical footsteps coming towards me, slowly like a cat stalking its prey. I took my chances. I turned around and sprinted back into the open and stepped into the next aisle. Oh no, no, I knew instantly. A tattered lump of grey clothing and sickly pale blue skin sat on the floor. The person, the creature, the thing folded in on itself in a pose reminiscent of a crying child, but it obviously wasn't anything resembling a human with its strange lumps and appendages and complete lack of head. I'd stepped into aisle 7. I immediately reversed direction, but not before the thing unfolded itself and began to move towards me. I whipped around, screaming, and sprinted down the next aisle. Miraculously, I made it to the end in one piece. I veered sharply left towards the break room. Almost there. Almost there. My hand hit the doorknob. I wrenched it open and dove inside. Then I collapsed in the chair, panting. I sucked in a breath, staring at the locked door. Am I really safe in here? Technically, the rules never said I would be safe. Maybe staying in here only decreased my chance of death. I turned my attention to the security camera feed on the monitor. It showed the middle of the store, and from what I could see, the aisles were empty. No trace of the woman. I switched to the next feed, the produce section. Empty. I switched to the next one. I jumped. She was standing right there, in front of the break room door. She stood so still. The image could have been a photograph, except for the blood slowly dripping from the meat in her basket. I swallowed and glanced away from the monitor at the door. My heart stammered into my ribs when I saw his shadow under the door. Go away. Please go away, I pleaded in my head. I forced my eyes. The shadow of her forced my eyes away and looked back at the screen. She was still standing there, except there was something different about the way she was standing. I squinted at the grainy black and white image, trying to figure out what was going on. When my eyes finally fell on her heels, I realized they were facing forward. But I was still looking at the back of her head, at the long black hair cascading to her waist. Either her hair was hanging over her face, or she turned her head all the way around. It must have been 20 minutes before she began to walk away from the door. I couldn't tell if it was just the low frame rate of these crummy cameras, but her movements looked jerky, her body lurching with each step. It made me sick to watch. When she disappeared from the screen, I let out a breath of relief. My hands and legs were shaking weak. Okay, think. The rules said to wait until she left. All I had to do was watch the feed by the front door. As soon as I saw her leave the store, I'd be safe. After a few minutes of sitting there, waiting for my heart rate to return to normal, I forced my fingers back to the keyboard. I pressed the arrow key to move to the next feed, then the next and the next, looking for the camera at the front of the store. No. Her face filled the entire screen. Her eyes filled me with horror. They were pure white, no pupils, no irises, just pure white eyes threaded with spidery veins. I screamed and jumped back, then I shut my eyes. The rules said don't make eye contact. Did that count? Through the screen, I let out a terrified, shuddering wail and covered my face with my hands, my entire body shaking. When I finally took a peek through my fingers, I saw her rapidly scale down the wall, away from the camera on the ceiling, like some kind of spider. Then she pushed through the glass doors and disappeared into the night. She'd left. I was safe, or as safe as I could be in this cursed grocery store. I glanced at the clock, 3:58 a.m. Time to patrol. I really didn't want to, but I forced myself to swing the door open and run as fast as I could through the store. I saw shopping carts stacked in teetering towers, heard hands pounding against the freezer doors, saw little spots of blood on the shiny tile from the woman as she'd stalked me. And then a minute later I was done. I locked myself in the break room and for the first time in years began to sob. The remaining patrols went by without incident though I did hear more sobbing from aisle 7 and more banging from the freezers, and then the hour had come, 6 a.m. My heart soared at the sight of the pink dawn sky through the glass doors. I was safe. I was free. When I glanced out into the parking lot, I saw a few cars pulling in, disgruntled, groggy employees clutching coffees heading towards me. As soon as the first one came in, I flew out of the store, ran to my car and got out of there as fast as I could. I never felt such relief, such happiness. I felt like a new man. All of my problems, even my financial ones, seemed dwarfed by what I'd just endured. When I pulled out onto the main road, I rolled down one of my windows and flicked on the radio. But it wasn't my usual classic rock station that blared through the speakers. Instead, I heard the upbeat tune of a saxophone, and as I listened to the combination of words that my co-workers and I pray we never see. You're in running for Employee of the Year. For him to send something so callous via email, that was just rubbing salt in the wound. My eyes glazed over the wall of text that followed. I didn't need to read the details. I'd cleaned enough of the prior winners off the walls and ceiling of the soundproofed break room to know exactly what that award entailed. After that initial deep bang of fear faded, denial flooded in to take its place. I wasn't just hitting my sales quota, I was blowing it out of the damn water, selling big ticket items daily. I never forgot to place the stickers with my barcode on the products either, so when my customers checked out, it was scanned at the register. The sale should have automatically been linked to my employee ID. We don't receive commission. There are other incentives to keep our sales up. I hadn't been watching the numbers because I knew I was making sales left and right. I would have never even dreamt that I was at risk. It was just a glitch. With our computer system, I decided with a nervous laugh it had to be something it could possibly sort out. Something IT could probably sort out in no time. When I finally regained control of my legs, I wobbled to my manager's office. There was no miscalculation, he assured me. It was my employee ID that ranked at the bottom. The barcodes never lie, Graham. He didn't even bother making eye contact. I was circling the train figuratively, and if I didn't get my shit together, literally soon enough. I begged him to review the camera footage. I knew he'd been able to see me making all of those sales. Don't worry, he added with a smile, vacant of anything remotely resembling happiness. One way or another, we all contribute to the success of our company. I suppose that by then he was long desensitized to the pleas of the desperate. As I left his office, I assured myself that this wasn't a death sentence. Not yet. I had another month until they recalculated our final standings, before shit would get real, before I'd be given a limp handshake and an empty thank you for your devotion to the company as I was led down the hallway, before I'd meet what lives behind the usually padlocked door in the shadowy corner of the break room, before I'd learn what it truly meant to sacrifice myself for the good of the company. Word spread fast around the office. Kevin gave me a smug, shit-eating grin. Maybe he thought that with me out of the picture, he'd finally have a shot with Elise. I just desperately hoped that hers wouldn't be the name drawn afterwards. The one selected to hose what's left of me off the break room floor and down the stained, rusty drain. As required, I began parking in my new designated space at the far end of the employee lot, the faded sign indicating it, reserved for Employee of the Year. Nearly swallowed up by the encroaching tree line, it added an extra 10 minutes to my walk to our store, and I dreaded that at the time in the oppressive Texas heat. The rational part of me knew that was soon to be a moot point, though. One way or another, in another month, I wouldn't have that parking spot. If I were lucky, I'd live to see another summer, live to see some other poor bastard's car parked there. If they hadn't already heard the news, when the rest of my co-workers saw my car in that space, they knew what it meant. Don't get too attached. They started avoiding me like the plague, and I didn't blame them. We all knew what would be coming next if my sales didn't improve. It's the same thing that happens every time. We'd gather for the mandatory meeting on the closing night of the fiscal year, all eyes on the sorry son of a bitch that had won. The room was so quiet that you could hear the muffled sobs they'd receive what barely constituted as a handshake from my manager, while he muttered dead-eyed his appreciation for their devotion to the company. Next they'd be ushered off to the break room to meet corporate. No one tried to run, not after what happened in 19. Instead, the winner would always turn back, shooting us a desperate final look, eyes bleeding for someone, anyone, to intervene. And of course, no one ever did. Once the door closed behind them and that soundproof room swallowed up the last of their sobbing, begging it was over, the rest of us would be sent home, and I tried to shout away that disgusting feeling, that sick sense of relief that someone else was sent to their death and not me. Cal, the nicest guy I'd ever met, he was the bottom performer 2 years ago. He'd fallen so ill that he'd nearly wasted away and eventually couldn't work anymore. He must have thought that freed him from his contract. If he left, if he never came back into work, he'd be okay. He must not have read the fine printing or hiring paperwork, although to be fair, if any one of us had read it, we'd never sign it in the first place. Cal was a warning to the rest of us that there is no quitting in our line of work. If they have to drag you down and find you, and I promise you that they will find you, well, wouldn't you prefer to go down with your dignity, with the company compensating your loved ones, rather than be pulled from your home kicking and screaming into the night? Gina was Employee of the Year in 2023. Gina with the kind smile whom Kevin had set his sights on before Elise, and just like Elise, she wanted nothing to do with him. I still remember that day, the day they released the final numbers, the way Gina's mouth hung open in confusion and shock. When she finally managed to form words again, she too insisted that there must be some mistake. We all vouched for her to management. I'd personally seen her make so many sales. Our manager simply reminded us that the barcode never lies. My name was the one drawn for the break room duty that next morning, to pick up what remained of her smile and a simple gold wedding band to be returned to her family. In one business week, they received a box containing a check and everything left of her that wouldn't fit down the drain. Once the numbers are finalised, once your employee barcode has been slapped on that innocuous-looking pink slip, well, your fate is sealed. Kevin, in all his years at the company, has never parked on the far side of the lot. He has never even come close to becoming Employee of the Year, even though he couldn't sell a bottle of water to a man dying of dehydration. He is a sleaze incarnate and doesn't even have the charisma to mask it. I never understood how he did so well, but I couldn't afford to think about him. I had myself to worry about, and a glitch in the system. Anytime I found myself in a break room, that ancient wooden door was an unwelcome reminder of the impending one-way trip it held for me. I took special care to keep an eye on my sales, working my arse off, pulling double shifts. I pulled up the numbers as the end of the month drew near, and couldn't believe it. I was still dead last. Somehow, there were days where less than half of my sales had been recorded to my employee number. I didn't understand. I waited for the opportunity to sneak into the manager's office and pull the footage myself. I'd show the boss that something had gone wrong with the calculations, that the system was broken. I finally got my chance. At first, I triumphantly watched myself make sale after sale, far more than had been credited to my account. For the first time in a month, I felt a sense of relief. I had evidence, and that I had to count for something. I switched feeds to the camera nearer to the registers so I could confirm that the codes were being scanned. I'd seen several scanned successfully and reached to turn off the recording. That's when I saw it. Saw him. Kevin, was subtle. I didn't realise what he was doing at first, until I recognised the pattern. Even then, I had to rewind and watch again for it to click. It happened for nearly half of my sales that day. I saw him intercepting the customers before they could check out, before I could get credit for my sales. And while he chatted them up, he discreetly slapped his employee barcode over my own. I confronted him that night. I was furious. He just smiled smugly, gave me that line about how the barcodes never lie. He didn't give a shit that he was sentencing someone else to death. Hell, maybe he even enjoyed it. Kevin had stole credit for Gina's sales, and God knows who else's. Fucking Kevin. The day our numbers were to be finalised, he had the audacity to place his barcode over mine on a huge sale I'd made. He made no attempt at hiding it. Right in front of me, he flashed me a grin as he did. I caught up with the customers before they checked out, and they kindly allowed me to peel the sticker off. I stuck it in my pocket to show my manager. I pulled the video too, and I stormed into his office, refused to leave it on until he watched it. I studied him as his eyes moved across the screen, and if he was upset or shocked, he certainly did show it. Finally, he met my eyes, and at the sight of the pain in his, well, for the first time, I felt a sense of relief. Until I realised why he looked so miserable, until he whispered, "I'm sorry, Graham. Someone has to receive that award tomorrow. It's out of my hands." I wordlessly handed him that damn barcode sticker of Kevin's that I peeled off. He studied it for a long moment before he handed it back to me with a mere, "Why don't you hold on to this?" I told Elsie what had happened over lunch, and as much as I appreciated her outrage on my behalf, I was already resigned to it. I'd mainly wanted to warn her because I had a sick feeling she'd be the one Kevin went after next. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't devastated when that night my boss called me into his office and informed me of his final standings. Yeah, I knew it was coming, but I guess it's just human nature to hold on to denial. Hope until the bitter end. Finally. For what felt like an eternity, we stared at each other in silence. The presence of the pink slip on the paper lying on the desk between us said more than enough. Finally, my eyes drifted down to the form. He'd already signed it, but the space where my barcode, the series of vertical lines spelling out my death sentence, should have been placed, was empty. I never knew how this part went, since it always took place behind closed doors. No one who ever filled out that form lived to tell the rest of us about it. "I need you to place a barcode here before I send the form to corporate," he said, eventually. I opened my mouth for one final, impassioned plea for my life, but he interrupted me. He spoke each word slowly, softly. "I'm leaving the room now. I need you to place a barcode here before I send the form to corporate." He stared at me for a long moment, waiting for my barely perceptible nod of acknowledgement before leaving me alone in the office. They processed the paperwork and announced the Employee of the Year the next day. Yes, I did feel a pang of guilt as I watched the smug grin fade, the blood drain from Kevin's face as he stared in shock at the outstretched hand of our manager, as he was thanked for his devotion to our company. I felt it again as I watched him bleed all the way to the break room as our manager spoke to him in the same mantra we'd all heard before. The barcodes never lie. But I thought of Gina, of the countless others, and by the time I heard the door slam behind him, the guilt was already gone. In its place, the relief of knowing the rest of us were safe, well, at least until next year. We are going to leave this pretty